afternoon. What an amazing program that Safe Families is. You know, what a selfless example of love. If there's anybody in the room that is on Olive Craft's staff that is involved with Safe Families, could you please stand? And can we just give them a round of applause as they're trying to extend this program further? Well, I thought I'd start out with a little bit of an icebreaker because I'm nervous to be up here. How many of this room can I see by show of hands is familiar with AA? Not many people in the room? Well, in AA they have a tradition of making people feel welcome when they get up to share their testimony. And if you're familiar with it, usually they start out by saying, "Hello, my name is," and then they greet them. So I'd like to start out by saying, "Hello, my name is Shannon, and I'm a recovering foster child." And you say, okay, we got that out of the way. Well, no, I also have the privilege and honor of working for Olive Crest's Fostering Together program. I do community engagement around Washington State, and it is such a blessing and an honor to be able to participate with families that are walking through this process. And I just love being able to be a part of encouraging them and also getting to know the children that are involved. I'm going to start out by sharing a few statistics with you. Did you know that there are over 500,000 youth in today's U.S. foster care system, and that number is continually growing? A study has shown that within 12 to 18 months after leaving foster care, 27% of males and 10% of females end up in jail. 33% receive public assistance. 37% do not even graduate high school. 50% of that number are homeless by the age of 18. In fact, a recent article I read stated that 60% of our street kids here in Seattle are former foster youth. 60% that have either aged out of the system or have run away looking for some form of relief from years of pain and trauma and care. So where is the solution? I don't share these things to scare you. I share them because they are a reality that simply cannot be ignored anymore. Each one of us in this room has a story. For many foster children, their stories go unheard. I am here today to share a little bit of mine with you, and my hope in sharing is just that you would reflect on the many children out there in care still waiting for their forever families, and that you would be inspired into action. One of my earliest memories that I have was one of abuse. I remember feeling paralyzed with fear and misunderstanding. For years, I lived at the mercy of a man who tore up my family. He poisoned my life with his verbal, emotional, and sexual abuse. He was my mom's boyfriend at the time. You may be asking yourself, why? How can a parent stand by and knowingly allow their child to be abused? I must admit, over the years, I've asked myself that question many of times, and I don't have an answer for you, at least not one that would satisfy. What I can offer is a little bit of background on my family. And I offer this because many kids in care right now have that same story, where they come from generations of abuse, and it's this ongoing cycle. So in my case, my grandmother and my mother and my siblings have all had to suffer through some form of abuse or neglect. And unfortunately, I'm starting to see that now with my nieces and nephews having children too young or on the streets turning to drugs and alcohol. Looking back, I can't expect, knowing that my mother had the best mentality or enough stability in her own life to raise me. It doesn't excuse what happened by any means, but it does help me grasp it. So despite threats to harm my mother if I ever told anyone what was going on in our home, I made the decision to talk to a family friend. This was a decision that would forever alter my life and the direction I was headed in. Soon after CPS, or Child Protective Services, arrived at my home, I was forced to quickly leave, stuffing all of my belongings in a single black garbage bag. I was returned home eventually, and my mother was given guidelines appointed by the court to keep me in her home. For reasons I am unsure of, she was either unwilling or unable to live her life apart from him. CPS arrived at my school the next time. I was 7 years old and had now become a ward of the state, or a foster child. Now, the goal with foster care is to first seek reconciliation with the birth family. In my case, my father was a severe alcoholic, and his decisions in his life were run by that addiction. My mother made the decision to marry my abuser while he was in prison serving time for what he had done. Neither one could follow through with those guidelines appointed by the court to get me back. I have very few memories of what these first years in care were like for me. Over a 3-year time span, I moved frequently, and I remember living in different homes in 3 different counties. I never knew where I would be sleeping, whose bed it would be in, what city I would be living in. I remember having lice all the time and wearing dirty clothes and continually struggling to fit in at school. I even spent some time in the home of a relative placement, but nothing seemed to work out. I know that this no doubt had much to do with me, the emotional, behavioral, and developmental problems, some of which Carolyn shared earlier that kids go through. Those were things that I struggled with, and they would have been a trying task for anyone to take on. Among many things in the stack that counselors had diagnosed me with, one of them was an attachment disorder. My way of survival in life had become about myself. Do whatever you have to do to just get by, to make it to the next day. The first way that I did this was to put up walls. I attempted to cut off any type of relationship that tried to enter, and I certainly didn't need anybody, and I could get through it on my own. I didn't want to be let down again, and at that point in my life, people had become so unreliable to me, especially those closest. Despite everything that had gone on, I lived each day with this longing desire to be with my birth mom. I wanted so much to belong to her, to feel loved and valued by her. And at that time in my life, it felt as though she were the only one who could fill that void. Yet I was continually reminded and shut down from that home by her lack of commitment to me. I can still recall the pain and the disappointment that I would feel. I would be there waiting. It was time for a visit with Mom, and I would either get one foot out the door or arrive at the location we were going to meet. Typically it was a McDonald's or a Burger King, when I would receive the phone call that she would not be coming that time. I want to fast forward for time's sake. I was going to be turning 11 this year and was considered unadoptable in many ways. I was actually on my way to a group home in Eastern Washington for teens when a foster family agreed to take me in. I want to share, because this is a vivid memory that I have of the room that I stayed in my new foster home. I remember it had pink and white striped wallpaper surrounding the room, and it had pink drapes, and there was a white daybed with fresh linens on it, and there was even a dollhouse in the corner waiting to be played with. And I share that memory only because a lot of families going into this may never get to see the result of the impact they have on a child. But something as simple as creating a surrounding that looks like it was created just for them can have an impact that goes beyond measures. When I arrived at their home, I was a very frightened, frail little girl. And I still had that one black garbage bag that I carried with me, not the same, mind you. But in that bag was my entire world. To say that I came with baggage is a huge understatement. By that time in my life, I had many black garbage bags. Not that I carried, but they were attached to me. And they were stuffed full with pain and broken promises that I clung to. I did not make the road easy for this family. I was very closed off, as I mentioned earlier, and had put up those walls as a way to protect myself. For me, it was easier to be alone than it was to risk showing love or emotion to another person, because I didn't want to risk not being loved in return. I struggled with my identity. I wondered, where was I going to end up? Did anybody really care? Whose family was I a part of? I can still recall times, and I had done this in many placements before, that I would sit on my floor in the bedroom, and I would press my ear up against the wall, and I would try and overhear their conversations. Who hasn't done that before to their parents? But in my case, I was listening not for what was under the Christmas tree or maybe what I was getting for my birthday. I was listening to hear the words, "It's time to send her away." They did not send me away. Despite all the trials and hardships that I brought their way, my family offered me one thing that I had never had before. They consistently loved me, and they offered me a place of comfort and a sense of stability that I had never experienced before. It was with their help and my faith that I discovered a love, a new identity, and a love for others that was rooted in something bigger. And it would help me overcome my past. I was never legally allowed to be adopted by this family. Things are done differently now, but back then my birth parents' rights were never officially terminated. I did live with them until I was 18 and aged out of the system. I graduated high school first in my family and went to college. They are mom and dad. They are part of my forever family, and they have been there along the way through the many different milestones that life brings. I am extremely thankful to my family for the sacrifices that they made. It is not the easiest decision to take in a child, especially one that comes from brokenness. Today, I am surrounded by a wonderful family network, and I also have a reconciled relationship with my birth mother. My husband Colin and I have been married for 11 years. I think that's another record breaker in my family. He's here with me today and has been an incredible support. I'd like you to stand because you don't need to come. He deserves that round of applause for everything he has to put up with from me. We have two beautiful children. Our son Canaan is 10, and he lives life each day with such drive and compassion for others, and I love to see that in him. And our daughter Taylor is 7, going on 21. But there's not a day that goes by that she doesn't impact somebody with her contagious joy that she has. I'm extremely blessed to be able to be a mom, and I believe it's why I was created. To not only teach them how to receive love, but to go out and to give it to others. But more than anything, I'm determined that they can leave a different family legacy behind, and that the chain of abuse will stop with me. Earlier, I shared some statistics with you, and I proposed the question, where is the solution? The solution starts with you. First, with sometimes a mental change, that I am only one person, therefore I can't do anything. And next comes the steps. understand that not everyone is called to foster adopt, but there are many opportunities for you to give back. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the first steps and being part of the healing process for a child out there in care waiting for their forever families.